crowd roared with laughter as the auctioneer called the starving, limping mare worthless and fit only for slaughter. But when a 12-year-old boy in torn overalls stepped into the ring clutching 8 crumpled dollars, every voice in that barn went dead silent. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The morning sun filtered through the weathered wooden slats of the auction barn, casting long shadows across the dusty floor where dozens of farmers, ranchers, and horse traders had gathered for the weekly livestock sale. The air was thick with the smell of hay and leather, and the murmur of voices filled the space as men in worn boots and faded hats assessed the animals being paraded through the central ring. Among the crowd stood a boy of perhaps 12 years. His name was Samuel, though everyone in the small town of Cedar Ridge simply called him Sam. His overalls were patched in 3 places, his shoes had holes that let in the morning dew, and his hands bore the calluses of someone who had worked hard since the day he could walk. Sam had come to the auction not to buy, but to dream. He loved horses more than anything in the world, and even though his family could barely afford to put food on the table, he found peace in watching these magnificent creatures pass through the ring, imagining a day when he might call one his own. The auctioneer, a portly man named Harold Bruckner with bright red suspenders stretched across his considerable belly, stood at his podium with a gavel in hand, his voice booming across the barn as he called out prices and descriptions. Harold was known throughout the county for his sharp tongue and sharper business sense. He had no patience for sentiment, and even less for animals he deemed unprofitable. To him, every creature that passed through his auction was nothing more than a number, a transaction waiting to happen. His eyes were always calculating, always measuring the worth of flesh and bone in terms of dollars and cents. As the morning wore on, the crowd began to thin. The best horses had already been sold to the highest bidders, their new owners leading them away with satisfied smiles. What remained were the older animals, the less desirable stock, and those unfortunate creatures that had somehow fallen through the cracks of proper care. It was then that 2 handlers brought forward a horse that made even the most hardened ranchers pause in their conversations. The animal was a mare of perhaps 8 years, her coat a dull chestnut that might once have gleamed like copper in the sunlight. But now, her ribs protruded sharply beneath her skin, creating a landscape of bones and shadows that spoke of weeks, perhaps months, of neglect. Her head hung low, and she walked with a pronounced limp in her left front leg, each step seeming to cost her tremendous effort. Harold Bruckner looked at the mare and let out a theatrical sigh that echoed through the barn. He raised his gavel and pointed it at the animal as if accusing her of some terrible crime. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced with a sneer that curled his lip, "what we have here is lot number 35. And I use the term lot loosely, because what you are looking at is perhaps the most worthless piece of horseflesh I have ever had the misfortune of presenting. Look at her. Lame, malnourished, probably diseased. This horse is fit for nothing but the glue factory, and even they might turn her away." The crowd laughed at his cruel joke, a ripple of chuckles spreading through the assembly like a disease of its own. The mare, as if understanding the words being spoken about her, seemed to shrink even further into herself. Sam watched from his spot near the back of the barn, his young heart breaking with every word that fell from the auctioneer's mouth. He had seen neglected animals before, had witnessed the casual cruelty that some people showed toward creatures that depended on them for survival, but something about this particular mare called to him in a way he could not explain. Perhaps it was the way her eyes, despite everything, still held a flicker of something that looked almost like hope. Perhaps it was the gentle way she had nuzzled against the handler's arm when he first led her in, seeking comfort even from strangers. Or perhaps Sam simply recognized in her a kindred spirit, another being that the world had decided was worthless, undeserving of love or care. Harold continued his mockery. warming to his role as entertainer at the mayor's expense. "I will start the bidding at $50, he declared, "though honestly, I would be surprised if anyone here is foolish enough to waste their money on this broken-down nag. Any takers? $50 for what might generously be called a horse." The barn fell silent. Not a single hand was raised. The farmers and ranchers exchanged glances, some shaking their heads, others already turning away to examine the remaining lots. The mare stood alone in the ring, surrounded by indifference and contempt, her fate seemingly sealed. "$40 then," Harold called out, lowering his voice with mock desperation. "Come on, folks. Surely someone can find a use for this creature. She might make decent fertilizer if nothing else." Again, the cruel laughter rippled through the crowd. Again, no hands were raised. Harold shook his head in disgust. $30, $20, $10, people. I am practically giving this animal away, and still no one wants her. This is what happens when you bring damaged goods to market. It was at that moment that something shifted inside Sam. He had been clutching in his pocket the only money he had in the world, a crumpled collection of bills and coins that amounted to exactly $8.43. He had been saving this money for months, doing odd jobs around town, collecting bottles, running errands for the elderly neighbors who lived down the road from his family's small farm. He had dreamed of one day having enough to buy something special, though he had never quite decided what that something might be. But standing there in that dusty auction barn, watching a beautiful creature being mocked and dismissed as worthless, Sam suddenly knew exactly what he needed to do. Before he could talk himself out of it, before the rational part of his mind could remind him of all the reasons why this was a terrible idea, Sam pushed his way through the crowd toward the auction ring. His heart pounded in his chest like a drum, and his legs felt weak with fear and determination. He could feel the eyes of the adults turning toward him, could hear the whispers beginning to spread through the barn. Harold Bruckner noticed the boy approaching, and his eyebrows rose in amused disbelief. "Well, well," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "What do we have here? A young entrepreneur come to make his fortune in the horse trade?" The crowd chuckled again, their attention now divided between the pathetic mare and the even more pathetic sight of a poor boy in patched overalls stepping into the auction ring. Sam felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment, but he forced himself to keep walking until he stood directly in front of the auctioneer's podium. He could feel the mare behind him now, could hear her labored breathing, and somehow that sound gave him courage. "I want a bid on her," Sam said, his voice cracking slightly but his words clear enough to be heard throughout the barn. The laughter that followed was louder this time, more pointed. Harold Bruckner leaned forward on his podium, his substantial belly pressing against the wood, and fixed Sam with a look that mixed pity with contempt. "Son," he said slowly, as if speaking to someone of limited intelligence, "this is not a charity. This is a business. Do you even have any money?" Sam reached into his pocket and pulled out his crumpled collection of bills and coins. He had counted it so many times that he could have told anyone exactly what was there without looking. $8.43, he announced, holding out his hand so the auctioneer could see. The barn erupted in laughter. Men slapped their thighs and wiped tears from their eyes. Someone shouted from the back that the boy should save his money for a toy horse instead. Harold Bruckner shook his head slowly, a grin spreading across his face at the absurdity of the situation. $8.43, he repeated, savoring each word. For a horse. Son, you cannot buy a decent saddle blanket for $8.43. Why would you want to waste your money on this lame, worthless animal? She will be dead within the month, mark my words. Sam stood his ground, though his hands trembled as he held out his money. Because she deserves a chance, he said quietly. Because everyone deserves someone who believes in them. The laughter began to die down, replaced by an uncomfortable silence. Something in the boy's words, Something in the simple sincerity of his voice had struck a chord that no one in that barn quite expected. Harold Bruckner straightened up, his smile fading into something more uncertain. He looked at the money in Sam's outstretched hand, then at the mare standing forlorn in the center of the ring, then back at the boy whose eyes held a determination that seemed far too large for his small frame. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sounds were the distant lowing of cattle from the holding pens and the soft shuffle of the mare's hooves on the dusty floor. Harold drummed his fingers on the podium, clearly wrestling with something inside himself. Finally, he let out a long sigh that seemed to deflate his entire body. $8.43, he said, his voice lacking its usual bluster, going once, going twice. He paused, looking around the barn as if hoping someone would step forward with a higher bid, would save him from the absurdity of what was about to happen. But no one moved, no one spoke. "Sold," Harold announced, bringing down his gavel with a sharp crack that echoed through the silent barn, to the young man with more heart than sense. Sam could hardly believe what had just happened. His legs felt like they might give out beneath him, and his heart was racing so fast he thought it might burst from his chest. But he forced himself to walk forward, to approach the mare that was now, impossibly, his. Up close, she looked even worse than she had from across the barn. Her coat was matted with dirt and dried sweat, her mane tangled with burrs and debris. The injury to her left front leg was clearly visible now, a swelling around the ankle that spoke of either a severe sprain or possibly something worse. But her eyes, those deep brown eyes that turned to look at Sam as he approached, held no malice, no fear. Only a quiet acceptance and perhaps the faintest glimmer of curiosity. "Hey there, girl," Sam whispered, reaching out slowly to touch her muzzle. The mare flinched slightly at first, clearly unused to gentle contact, but then she leaned into his touch, her warm breath washing over his fingers. "It is okay now. I have got you. I am going to take care of you, I promise." The handler who had been holding the mare's lead rope handed it over to Sam with an expression that mixed skepticism with something that might have been respect. "Good luck, kid," he muttered. "You are going to need it." Sam led the mare slowly out of the auction barn, acutely aware of every limp, every stumble she made. The crowd parted before them, some people shaking their heads in disbelief, others watching with expressions that were harder to read. A few of the older farmers exchanged glances that seemed to carry entire conversations within them. As Sam passed by one weathered rancher named Old Thomas, who had been farming in Cedar Ridge for over 50 years, the man reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. "That was either the bravest thing I have ever seen," Thomas said quietly, "or the most foolish. Time will tell which." Sam nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The walk home was long and slow, over 3 miles of dirt roads and open fields. Sam had to stop several times to let the mare rest, her injured leg clearly causing her significant pain with every step. During these pauses, he would talk to her softly, telling her about his life, about his family's small farm, about his dreams and hopes for the future. The mare listened, or seemed to listen, her ears swiveling toward the sound of his voice, her eyes following his movements with increasing trust. By the time they finally reached the weathered fence that marked the boundary of Sam's family property, something had changed between them. They were no longer strangers. They were partners, bound together by circumstance and choice, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Sam's mother was standing on the porch when they arrived, her hands still dusted with flour from the bread she had been baking. Her eyes went wide when she saw what her son was leading up the path. "Samuel James Harrison," she called out, her voice carrying that particular mixture of love and exasperation that only mothers can achieve. "What on earth have you done now?" Sam took a deep breath and continued leading the mare toward the small barn that stood behind their modest farmhouse. He knew this conversation was coming, had been dreading it the entire walk home. But there was no avoiding it now. His mother climbed down from the porch and walked toward them, her eyes taking in every detail of the pathetic creature her son had brought home. Up close, the mare looked even worse than she had at a distance. The sharp angles of her bones, the dullness of her coat, the way she favored her injured leg with every step. Sarah Harrison was not a woman given to harsh words or quick judgments, but even she could not hide the concern that clouded her features as she examined the animal. "Samuel," she said again, her voice softer now but no less serious. "We can barely afford to feed ourselves. Your father works double shifts at the mill just to keep this roof over our heads, and you brought home a horse? A sick horse at that?" Sam felt tears prickling at the corners of his eyes, but he blinked them back. He had known this would be hard. He had known his mother would not understand, at least not at first. But he also knew, with a certainty that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside him, that he had done the right thing. "She was going to die, Mama," he said quietly. "They were going to send her to the slaughterhouse because nobody wanted her. Nobody thought she was worth saving. But I looked in her eyes, and I saw something there, something worth fighting for. I could not just walk away and let her die." His mother's expression softened slightly, though the worry lines remained etched around her eyes. She reached out and gently touched the mare's neck, feeling the bones beneath the thin layer of skin. "How much did you pay for her?" she asked. $8.43, Sam admitted. "Everything I had saved." Sarah Harrison closed her eyes for a moment, and Sam could see her wrestling with conflicting emotions. On one hand, she had raised her son to be compassionate, to care for those who could not care for themselves. On the other hand, they lived in a world where compassion often came with a price they could not afford to pay. When she opened her eyes again, they were glistening with unshed tears. "That was your money," she finally said. "You worked hard for it, and you had every right to spend it however you chose. But Samuel, you need to understand something. We cannot afford a veterinarian. We cannot afford special feed or medicine. If this horse is going to survive, it will be because of your efforts and nothing else. Are you prepared for that responsibility?" Sam nodded solemnly. "I am, Mama. I will do whatever it takes. I will find a way to make this work. I promise." His mother studied him for a long moment, then sighed and pulled him into a tight embrace. "You have a good heart, Samuel Harrison," she murmured into his hair. "Just like your grandfather. He could never turn away from a creature in need either. Just promise me you will not let this break you if things do not work out the way you hope." Sam hugged her back, breathing in the familiar scent of flower and lavender that always clung to her clothes. "I promise," he said. That evening, after his father had come home from the mill and been given a condensed version of the day's events, Sam set to work making the mare as comfortable as possible. The family's barn was small and old, built by Sam's great-grandfather nearly 60 years earlier, but it was sturdy and dry. Sam cleared out a corner stall that had been used for storage, sweeping away years of accumulated dust and debris. He laid down fresh straw that he had carefully rationed from their limited supply, creating a soft bed for the mare to rest on. He filled a bucket with clean water from the well and found an old feed pan that he scrubbed until it shone. The mare watched him work with those patient brown eyes, her head following his movements around the stall. When he finally led her inside and removed her halter, she stood quietly for a moment, as if unable to believe that this warm, clean space was meant for her. Then slowly and with obvious relief, she lowered herself onto the straw bed and let out a long, shuddering breath. Sam sat down beside her, not caring that the straw was poking through his thin pants, and began to gently stroke her neck. "I am going to call you Hope," he told her softly, "because that is what you are. You are hope that things can get better, that broken things can be fixed, that the world is not as cruel as it sometimes seems." Hope lifted her head slightly and looked at him, and Sam could have sworn he saw understanding in her eyes. The name seemed to settle over her like a blanket, fitting perfectly. Over the next several days, Sam dedicated every spare moment to caring for Hope. He woke before dawn each morning to check on her, to make sure she had fresh water and whatever food he could scrape together. The local feed store owner, a kind man named Mr. Patterson, who had heard about Sam's purchase at the auction, donated a bag of senior horse feed that was slightly past its prime but still nutritious. One of the neighboring farmers brought over a bale of alfalfa hay that his own horses had refused to eat. These small acts of kindness, unexpected and unasked for, helped Sam keep Hope fed during those critical first weeks. The mare's injured leg was a constant source of worry. Sam did not know exactly what was wrong with it, but he could see that it caused her significant pain. He researched everything he could about horse injuries at the small-town library, spending hours poring over veterinary manuals and farming guides. He learned about cold compresses and hot poultices, about the importance of rest and gradual exercise. He fashioned a makeshift wrap from old bandages his mother had saved, carefully binding Hope's swollen ankle each morning and checking it each night for signs of improvement or infection. His father, Thomas Harrison, was a man of few words but deep feelings. He had initially been skeptical of his son's impulsive purchase, worried about the financial strain it would place on their already stretched resources. But as he watched Sam work tirelessly to care for the mare, something shifted in his perspective. He began helping in small ways, reinforcing the stall door, fixing a leak in the barn roof that had gone unrepaired for years. One evening he even sat with Sam in the barn, both of them watching Hope eat her dinner in companionable silence. The weeks that followed were filled with both small victories and heartbreaking setbacks. Some mornings, Sam would arrive at the barn to find Hope standing on all four legs, her weight distributed more evenly than the day before, and his heart would soar with hope. Other mornings, she would be lying down, her injured legs swollen and hot to the touch, and he would fight back tears of frustration and fear. Through it all, he never wavered in his commitment to her recovery. He talked to her constantly, sharing his thoughts and dreams, his worries and fears, as if she were the closest friend he had ever had. And in many ways, she was. The children at school had heard about Sam's purchase, of course. News traveled fast in a small town like Cedar Ridge, and the story of the poor boy who had bought the worthless horse was too good not to share. Some of his classmates teased him mercilessly, calling him names and mocking his foolishness. Billy Thornton, the son of the wealthiest rancher in the county, was particularly cruel. His family owned dozens of horses, all of them healthy and strong and valuable, and he could not understand why anyone would waste their time on a broken-down animal that should have been put out of its misery. "Hey there, horse doctor," Billy would call out whenever he saw Sam in the schoolyard. "How is your glue factory reject doing today? Has she keeled over yet? Or is she still wasting your family's food?" Sam learned to ignore these taunts, though they stung more than he cared to admit. He would simply put his head down and walk away, thinking about Hope waiting for him at home, thinking about the progress she was making despite what everyone else believed. Not everyone was cruel, however. There was a girl in Sam's class named Emily Chen, whose family ran the small medical clinic in town. She had always been kind to Sam, and when she heard about Hope, she approached him one afternoon with a shy smile and a worn book in her hands. "My mother used to have horses when she was young," Emily explained, holding out the book. This was her veterinary guide. "It is old, but the information is still good. I thought it might help you with your mare." Sam took the book with trembling hands, touched beyond words by the gesture. "Thank you," he managed to say. "This means more than you know." Emily just smiled and walked away, leaving Sam with a valuable resource that would prove instrumental in Hope's recovery. Using the information in the book, combined with what he had learned from the library and his own observations, Sam developed a rehabilitation routine for Hope. Each morning before school, he would unwrap her leg and examine it carefully, checking for heat, swelling, or any signs of infection. He would apply a cold compress made from rags soaked in well water, holding it against her ankle until the swelling reduced. In the evenings, after his homework was done, he would switch to warm poultices made from herbs that grew wild in the fields behind their farm. His mother had taught him which plants had healing properties, knowledge passed down through generations of Harrison women, and he used this wisdom to create natural remedies that seemed to ease Hope's pain. Gradually, almost imperceptibly at first, Hope began to improve. The swelling in her leg decreased, though it never completely disappeared. She started putting more weight on it, taking tentative steps around her stall, then around the small paddock that Sam had fenced off behind the barn. Her appetite increased, and as she ate more, her ribs became less prominent. Her coat began to regain some of its former luster. Sam spent hours grooming her each week, brushing out the tangles and burrs, cleaning her hooves, treating the small cuts and abrasions that covered her body. With each passing day, she looked less like the pathetic creature from the auction and more like the horse she was always meant to be. The bond between them deepened with every shared moment. Hope would nicker softly whenever she heard Sam approaching, her ears pricking forward with obvious pleasure. She would follow him around the paddock like a faithful dog, her muzzle never far from his shoulder. When he sat down to rest against the fence post, she would lower her head and breathe softly into his hair, a gesture of affection that never failed to make him smile. For Sam, these moments were worth more than all the money in the world. He had never felt so connected to another living being, had never known that such a deep and wordless understanding could exist between a boy and a horse. About 2 months after the auction, something remarkable happened. Sam was leading Hope around the paddock for her daily exercise, walking slowly to accommodate her still healing leg, when she suddenly pulled against the lead rope and tossed her head. Before Sam could react, she broke into a trot, moving with a fluidity and grace that he had never seen from her before. Her limp was still there, visible in the slight hitch of her stride, but it no longer seemed to cause her pain. She was moving for the joy of movement, for the pure pleasure of feeling the wind in her mane and the ground beneath her hooves. Sam stood frozen, watching her circle the paddock with tears streaming down his face. In that moment, he knew that all his efforts, all his sacrifices had been worth it. Word of Hope's recovery spread through Cedar Ridge almost as quickly as the news of her purchase had. People who had laughed at Sam in the auction barn now stopped by the Harrison farm to see the miracle horse for themselves. They would lean against the paddock fence, watching Hope graze peacefully in the afternoon sun, and shake their heads in disbelief. Old Thomas, the weathered rancher who had spoken to Sam on the day of the auction, came by one Sunday afternoon with a gift. It was a worn leather halter, supple with age and care, that had belonged to his own first horse many decades ago. "I said time would tell whether what you did was brave or foolish," Thomas reminded Sam as he handed over the halter. "I reckon now we have our answer." Sam accepted the gift with profound gratitude, understanding the significance of what the old man was offering. It was more than just a piece of equipment. It was an acknowledgement, a recognition that Sam had proven himself worthy of respect. He put the halter on Hope that very afternoon, adjusting the straps until it fit perfectly, and she wore it with a dignity that seemed to reflect the transformation she had undergone. She was no longer the worthless horse that nobody wanted. She was Hope, beloved and cherished, a living testament to the power of love and perseverance. As spring melted into summer, Hope continued to flourish under Sam's devoted care. Her coat had transformed from a dull, lifeless brown to a rich chestnut that gleamed like burnished copper in the sunlight. Her muscles, once wasted and weak, had filled out with proper nutrition and regular exercise. Though she would always carry a slight limp from her injury, It no longer hindered her movement in any significant way. The veterinarian from the next county over, Dr. Margaret Wells, had come by at the request of Mr. Patterson from the feed store. She examined Hope thoroughly and declared her recovery nothing short of remarkable. "Whatever you have been doing," she told Sam with genuine admiration in her voice, "keep doing it. This horse should not be alive, let alone thriving. You have given her a second chance at life." The summer also brought news of the annual Cedar Ridge County Fair, an event that the entire region looked forward to with great anticipation. There were competitions for everything from pie baking to pig racing, but the highlight of the fair was always the horse show. Riders from across the county would bring their finest animals to compete in various categories, from dressage to jumping to barrel racing. The most prestigious event, however, was the open trail competition, a grueling test of horse and rider that wound through 5 miles of difficult terrain, including steep hills, water crossings, and dense forest paths. The winner received not only a substantial cash prize, but also a silver trophy that had been passed down through generations of champions. Sam had never considered entering the competition. It was dominated by wealthy families like the Thorntons, who had access to the best horses, the best equipment, and the best trainers. Billy Thornton had won the junior division for 3 years running, riding a different expensive horse each time, and he made sure everyone knew it. The idea of a poor boy on a rescued horse competing against such established riders seemed laughable. But as Sam watched Hope moving through the paddock one evening, her stride confident and sure despite her slight limp, a thought began to form in his mind. What if they could do it? What if they could prove to everyone that worth was not determined by price tags and pedigrees? He mentioned the idea to his parents over dinner that night, fully expecting them to dismiss it as foolish dreaming. To his surprise, his father set down his fork and looked at him with an expression that Sam had never seen before. It was something like pride mixed with concern, a recognition that his son was no longer the child he had once been. "The entry fee is $20, Thomas Harrison said slowly. "That is a lot of money for us. But if this is something you truly want to do, we will find a way to make it happen." Sam could hardly believe what he was hearing. His mother reached across the table and squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "You have worked so hard for that horse," she said softly. "You deserve a chance to show everyone what you have accomplished together." The weeks leading up to the fair were filled with intensive preparation. Sam spent every available moment training with Hope, teaching her the skills she would need to compete in the trail competition. They practiced water crossings at the shallow creek that ran through the back of their property, navigating the slippery rocks and unpredictable currents until Hope could traverse them without hesitation. They worked on hill climbing in the steep pastures beyond the town limits, building up her stamina and strengthening her legs. They even practiced navigating through dense brush, with Sam guiding Hope through the thicket behind old Thomas's property, learning to communicate through subtle shifts in weight and gentle pressure from his legs. The training was not without its challenges. There were days when Hope seemed to struggle, when her old injury flared up, and she moved with obvious discomfort. On those days, Sam would call off the training and simply sit with her in the paddock, talking softly and letting her rest. He refused to push her beyond her limits, refused to sacrifice her well-being for the sake of competition. If they were going to do this, they would do it on Hope's terms, at Hope's pace, and somehow that approach seemed to work. The mare responded to his patience with increased trust and effort, pushing herself harder when she was able because she knew he would never ask more of her than she could give. News of Sam's intention to enter the competition spread quickly through Cedar Ridge. Most people reacted with skepticism or outright derision. The idea of a rescued horse competing against the finest animals in the county seemed absurd to them. Billy Thornton, predictably, was the loudest critic. He cornered Sam outside the general store one afternoon, flanked by 2 of his equally wealthy friends, and made his contempt perfectly clear. "You're actually going to embarrass yourself at the fair," Billy sneered. "That broken-down nag of yours will probably collapse before she makes it halfway through the course. Why do you not just save yourself the humiliation and stay home where you belong?" Sam felt the familiar sting of anger and shame that Billy's words always provoked, but this time something was different. He thought about Hope waiting for him at home, about all the progress they had made together, about the bond they had forged through months of shared struggle and triumph. And he realized that Billy's opinion simply did not matter anymore. He had nothing to prove to Billy Thornton or anyone else. He was entering this competition for himself and for Hope, to celebrate everything they had overcome, regardless of the outcome. "I will see you at the fair, Billy," Sam said calmly, meeting the other boy's eyes without flinching. "May the best horse win." The morning of the competition dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect summer day that seemed designed for outdoor events. Sam woke before the sun was fully up, too nervous and excited to sleep any longer. He dressed quickly in his cleanest clothes, the ones his mother had mended and pressed especially for this occasion, and hurried out to the barn. Hope was already awake, her head turned toward the door as if she had been waiting for him. She nickered softly when she saw him, and Sam felt a wave of emotion wash over him. Today was the day. Whatever happened, they would face it together. His father had borrowed a neighbor's horse trailer, a rickety old thing that had seen better days, but was still functional. Together, the Harrison family loaded Hope into the trailer and made the short drive to the fairgrounds. The scene that greeted them was overwhelming. Hundreds of people milled about between colorful tents and booths. The smell of fried food and cotton candy mingled with the earthier scents of livestock and hay. And everywhere Sam looked, there were horses. Beautiful, expensive, perfectly groomed horses that made Hope look like exactly what she was, a rescued animal with a crooked leg and a questionable past. Sam unloaded Hope from the trailer with careful, practiced movements, speaking to her softly the entire time. The mare seemed nervous, her ears swiveling constantly as she took in the unfamiliar sights and sounds of the fairgrounds. There were so many people, so much noise and activity, that Sam worried she might become overwhelmed, but as he stroked her neck and murmured reassurances, she gradually calmed, her trust in him overriding her instinctive fear. "That is my girl," he whispered. "We are in this together, remember? Just you and me, like always." The registration tent was located near the main arena, and Sam made his way there with Hope walking obediently at his side. The woman behind the table, a stern-faced matron with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, looked up as they approached. Her eyes traveled from Sam's patched overalls to Hope's slightly uneven gait, and her expression shifted to one of barely concealed disdain. "Name?" she asked flatly, her pen poised over the registration form. "Samuel Harrison," Sam replied, keeping his voice steady. "And this is Hope. We are here to register for the open trail competition." The woman's eyebrows rose nearly to her hairline. "The open trail competition," she repeated, as if she had not heard correctly. "Young man, that is our most challenging event. Are you certain you would not prefer to enter something more suitable? Perhaps the lead line class for beginners?" Sam felt his cheeks flush with embarrassment, but he held his ground. "No, ma'am. The open trail competition, please." The woman shrugged, her expression making it clear that she thought he was making a terrible mistake. She took his entry fee, the $20 his family had scraped together from their meager savings, and handed him a number to pin on his back. "You will be rider number 47, she informed him. "The competition begins at noon. Good luck." The way she said those last two words made it sound more like a condemnation than a blessing. Sam found a quiet spot near the edge of the fairgrounds where he and Hope could wait for the competition to begin. He used the time to give her a final grooming, brushing her coat until it shone and carefully cleaning her hooves. He checked her leg wrap one last time, making sure it was secure but not too tight. He braided her mane with clumsy but loving fingers, wanting her to look her best even if she could never match the elaborate preparations of the other horses. As he worked, he talked to her constantly, telling her how proud he was of her, how far they had come together, how much he believed in her. The other competitors began arriving in force as noon approached. Sam watched them from his secluded spot, feeling increasingly out of place. These were serious riders with serious horses, animals that probably cost more than his family's entire farm. Billy Thornton arrived in a gleaming silver trailer pulled by a brand new pickup truck, his horse a magnificent bay stallion named Conqueror that had won numerous competitions throughout the state. Billy was dressed in expensive riding gear, his boots polished to a mirror shine, his helmet probably worth more than everything Sam owned. When he spotted Sam and Hope, he did not bother to hide his amusement. "Well, if it is not the charity case and his rescue project," Billy called out loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "I hope you brought a wheelbarrow to carry your horse home in after she breaks down on the trail." Sam said nothing, simply continuing to stroke Hope's neck. He had learned that responding to Billy's taunts only encouraged him, and he had more important things to focus on right now. His parents found him a few minutes before the competition was set to begin. His mother hugged him tightly, her eyes bright with a mixture of pride and worry. "Just do your best, sweetheart," she said. "That is all anyone can ask." His father clasped his shoulder firmly, and in that simple gesture, Sam felt a lifetime of unspoken support and love. "We will be watching from the finish line," Thomas Harrison said gruffly. "No matter what happens out there, you have already made us proud." The competitors gathered at the starting area, a wide clearing at the edge of the fairgrounds where the trail disappeared into the surrounding forest. There were 23 riders in total, ranging in age from teenagers to seasoned adults. Sam, at 12 years old, was by far the youngest. He was also clearly the poorest, his simple clothes and humble horse standing in stark contrast to the wealth and privilege that surrounded him. The other riders barely acknowledged his presence, their attention focused on their own preparations and strategies. Only one person offered him a word of encouragement, a middle-aged woman on a dappled gray mare who leaned over and smiled kindly. "First time competing?" she asked. Sam nodded, not trusting his voice. She reached out and patted Hope's neck approvingly. "She has good eyes, this one. Kind and smart. Those are the ones that will surprise you. Good luck out there." The starting horn sounded, and the riders surged forward onto the trail. Sam held Hope back slightly, not wanting to get caught up in the initial rush. He knew they could not compete with the faster horses in terms of raw speed. Their only chance was to run a smart, steady race, conserving energy for the difficult sections of the course and avoiding the mistakes that often plagued overeager competitors. Hope seemed to understand his strategy instinctively. She settled into a comfortable pace, her breathing even and controlled, her attention focused on the trail ahead. The first mile was relatively easy, a gentle downhill slope through open meadow that allowed the horses to find their rhythm. Sam used this time to settle his own nerves, focusing on the connection between himself and Hope, letting everything else fade into the background. The expensive horses with their expensive riders gradually pulled ahead, but Sam did not let this discourage him. He knew the real challenges lay ahead, and he trusted that Hope would rise to meet them. The trail narrowed as they entered the forest, the canopy of trees blocking out most of the sunlight and creating a cool, shadowy world that felt miles away from the noise and excitement of the fairgrounds. They encountered the first obstacle about halfway through the second mile, a creek crossing that required the horses to navigate slippery rocks and unpredictable currents. Sam could see several riders ahead of him struggling with this section, their horses balking at the water or losing their footing on the mossy stones. But Hope approached the creek without hesitation, her training kicking in as she picked her way carefully across. Sam guided her with subtle movements of his legs and gentle pressure on the reins, and together they crossed smoothly, while other competitors splashed and stumbled around them. When they reached the far bank, Sam allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. One obstacle down, many more to go. The trail grew steeper as they climbed into the hills that bordered the northern edge of the county. This was the section that separated the serious competitors from those who had merely shown up to participate. The incline was brutal, a 45-degree slope covered with loose shale and exposed roots that threatened to trip even the most sure-footed horse. Sam leaned forward in his saddle, shifting his weight to help Hope maintain her balance as she labored up the hill. Her breathing grew heavier, and he could feel the effort in every step she took. But she never faltered, never hesitated, just kept pushing forward with a determination that made his heart swell with pride. About halfway up the slope, Sam passed a rider who had dismounted and was trying to coax his reluctant horse up the hill. The animal, a beautiful palomino with a flowing white mane, had planted its feet and refused to budge despite its rider's increasingly frustrated commands. A little further on, another competitor had stopped entirely, his horse's sides heaving with exhaustion. These were expensive animals bred for speed and beauty rather than endurance and grit. They had never known hardship, never had to fight for their survival, and when faced with true adversity, they simply did not know how to respond. Hope, on the other hand, had been forged in the fires of struggle. Every step she took on this hillside was a testament to the months of rehabilitation and training, to the bond she shared with Sam, to the unconquerable spirit that had refused to let her die when everyone else had given up. They crested the hill and paused briefly at the top to catch their breath. From this vantage point, Sam could see the trail winding down through the forest below, eventually emerging into the open meadow where the finish line waited. He could also see the other competitors spread out along the course, some still struggling with the hill climb, others already beginning the descent. Billy Thornton and his magnificent stallion were nowhere in sight, presumably already far ahead. But that was all right. Sam had never expected to beat Billy. He just wanted to finish, to prove to everyone that Hope was worthy of respect, that their partnership was something special regardless of ribbons or trophies. The descent proved even more treacherous than the climb. The trail was narrow and steep with sharp switchbacks that required precise maneuvering. One wrong step could send horse and rider tumbling down the mountainside. Sam guided Hope with extreme care, letting her pick her own path when possible, trusting her instincts even when they contradicted his own impulses. She moved with remarkable grace considering her injury, her good legs compensating for the weakness in her left front, her ears constantly swiveling as she assessed the terrain ahead. They passed two more stopped competitors on the way down, one of whom was sitting on a rock with his head in his hands, while his horse grazed unconcernedly nearby. The strain of the competition was taking its toll on everyone. About 3/4 of the way through the course, they encountered the obstacle that Sam had been dreading most, a series of fallen logs that had to be jumped in quick succession. This was the kind of challenge that favored younger, stronger horses with perfect legs and powerful hindquarters. It was also the kind of challenge that could easily aggravate Hope's old injury if they were not careful. Sam slowed their pace as they approached, assessing the logs and calculating the best approach. There were 3 of them, spaced about 15 feet apart, each roughly 2 feet high. Not particularly impressive jumps on their own, but the quick succession and uneven ground between them made them dangerous. Sam made a decision. Rather than risk Hope's leg on the jumps, he would take the penalty and go around. There was an alternate path marked with yellow flags that added distance to the course but avoided the logs entirely. It would cost them time, probably enough to drop them to the back of the pack, but Sam did not care. He would never forgive himself if Hope was injured because of his pride. He began to guide her toward the alternate path when something unexpected happened. Hope resisted, pulling against the reins and tossing her head toward the logs. She had seen the obstacle, and she wanted to attempt it. Sam hesitated, torn between his protective instincts and his trust in his horse. Hope stamped her foot impatiently, as if urging him to let her try. In her eyes, Sam saw no fear, only determination and perhaps a hint of wounded pride. She had worked hard to recover from her injury. She had proven herself capable of things that no one thought possible, and now she wanted the chance to prove it one more time. "All right, girl," Sam finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "If you think you can do it, I trust you. Let us show them what we are made of." He gave Hope her head, letting her approach the logs at her own pace. She gathered herself at the last moment, her muscles coiling beneath him, and then they were airborne. The first jump was clean, her hooves clearing the log with inches to spare. She landed smoothly, took 2 quick strides, and launched into the second jump. Again, clean. Sam felt a surge of exhilaration as they approached the final log. Hope was moving beautifully now, her rhythm perfect, her confidence evident in every line of her body. She pushed off with her powerful hindquarters and sailed over the last obstacle, landing on the far side with a triumphant snort. Sam whooped with joy, leaning forward to wrap his arms around Hope's neck in an awkward mid-ride embrace. "You did it," he shouted, not caring who heard him. "You amazing, wonderful, incredible horse. You did it." Hope tossed her head as if acknowledging the praise, then settled back into her steady pace as they continued down the trail. The final stretch was a long straightaway through open meadow, the finish line visible in the distance. Sam could see a crowd gathered there, could hear the faint sounds of cheering and applause. He could also see that several horses had already finished, their riders dismounted and receiving congratulations from family and friends. They had not won. They were not even close to winning. But as Sam and Hope galloped toward the finish line, none of that seemed to matter. They had completed the course together, had overcome every obstacle, had proven everyone wrong who had ever doubted them. In that moment, crossing that finish line, they were the greatest champions the world had ever seen. The crowd at the finish line parted as Sam and Hope came thundering through, their applause a mixture of polite acknowledgement and genuine surprise. No one had expected the poor boy on the lame horse to actually complete the course. Many had assumed they would drop out somewhere along the trail, defeated by the same obstacles that had claimed several other competitors. But here they were, crossing the finish line with their heads held high, covered in sweat and dust, but undeniably victorious in their own way. Sam pulled Hope to a gentle stop and slid down from her back on trembling legs. The adrenaline that had carried him through the competition was beginning to fade, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion that made every movement feel like wading through water. His parents rushed over immediately, his mother wrapping him in a fierce embrace, while his father stroked Hope's neck with uncharacteristic tenderness. "You did it," his mother kept saying, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You actually did it. I am so proud of you both." Sam hugged her back, too overwhelmed with emotion to speak. Around them, other spectators were pointing and whispering, their earlier skepticism transformed into something closer to admiration. The woman who had registered him approached with a considerably warmer expression than she had worn earlier. "That was quite a ride, young man," she said. "You and your horse have earned a lot of respect today." Sam thanked her quietly, then turned his attention back to Hope. The mare was breathing heavily but seemed otherwise unharmed. He ran his hands down her legs, checking for any signs of injury from the jumps, and was relieved to find nothing concerning. Her old injury had held up remarkably well. She had pushed herself to her limits and emerged stronger for it. "Good girl," he murmured, pressing his forehead against her warm neck. "You showed them all. You showed them what you are really worth." The official results were announced about an hour later, after all the competitors had either finished or withdrawn from the course. Billy Thornton had won, of course, his expensive stallion completing the trail in record time. He stood on the winner's podium accepting the silver trophy with a smug smile that Sam could see even from across the fairgrounds. Second place went to the middle-aged woman on the dappled gray mare who had offered Sam encouragement before the race. Third place was claimed by a teenage girl from the neighboring county whose family had been breeding competition horses for generations. Sam and Hope had finished in 11th place out of 23 starters, a remarkable achievement given their circumstances, but not enough to earn any official recognition. Sam did not mind. He had never entered the competition expecting to win. But as he stood with his family watching Billy Thornton bask in the adulation of the crowd, he could not help feeling a twinge of disappointment, not for himself, but for Hope. She had worked so hard, had overcome so much, and she deserved more than to be overlooked simply because she did not have the right pedigree or the right owner. It was not fair. But then again, life rarely was. Sam had learned that lesson early, growing up poor in a world that valued wealth above almost everything else. The awards ceremony concluded, and the crowd began to disperse, families heading off to enjoy the other attractions of the fair. Sam was leading Hope back toward their borrowed trailer when he heard a commotion behind him. He turned to see a cluster of people gathering near the winner's podium, their voices raised in alarm. Something was wrong. Pushing through the crowd, Sam saw what had caused the disturbance. Billy Thornton's stallion, the magnificent conqueror who had just won the competition, was rearing and thrashing against his handler. The horse's eyes were wild with panic, his nostrils flared, his powerful hooves striking out at anyone who came too close. Something had spooked him badly, though no one seemed to know what. Billy himself was standing several feet away, his trophy clutched to his chest, his face pale with fear. He was shouting at his father's stable hands to control the horse, but none of them could get close enough without risking serious injury. Conqueror was a powerful animal, trained for competition, but not for the chaos and noise of a crowded fairground. Whatever had frightened him had triggered a primal flight response that overrode all his training. Each passing second, he grew more agitated, more dangerous. Several spectators had already been knocked down in his frenzy, and it was only a matter of time before someone got seriously hurt. Sam watched the scene unfold with growing alarm. He knew horses, knew how fear could overwhelm even the most well-trained animal, knew that the longer this continued, the worse it would become. Without really thinking about what he was doing, he handed Hope's lead rope to his father and began walking toward the panicked stallion. "Sam, no," his mother called out, her voice sharp with fear. But Sam kept walking. He did not know if he could help, but he knew he had to try. The crowd parted before him, people stepping back with expressions of disbelief and concern. Who was this poor boy in patched overalls approaching a horse that had already injured several adults? Billy Thornton spotted him and let out a harsh laugh despite the tension. "What do you think you are doing, Charity Case?" he demanded. "That horse is worth more than your entire life. If you get hurt, we will not be responsible." Sam ignored him completely, his attention focused entirely on Conqueror. The stallion was still rearing and thrashing, but Sam could see beneath the panic to the fear that drove it. This was not a dangerous horse. This was a frightened animal that needed someone to show him that everything was going to be okay. Sam began to speak, his voice low and calm, the same tone he had used countless times when Hope was struggling through her recovery. "Easy there, boy. Easy now. Nobody is going to hurt you. You are safe. Just calm down, that is all. Just calm down." The words themselves did not matter as much as the tone in which they were delivered. Sam had learned that horses responded more to emotion than to language, and right now he was projecting nothing but peace and reassurance. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Conqueror began to respond. His rearing became less violent. His eyes lost some of their wild panic. He was still agitated, still frightened, but he was also listening. Sam continued his slow approach, never breaking eye contact with the frightened stallion, his voice maintaining that steady, soothing rhythm. He could feel the eyes of the crowd on him, could sense their collective held breath as they watched this unlikely scene unfold. A poor boy in patched overalls approaching a 1,000-pound animal, that had already injured several trained handlers. It should have been absurd. It should have been suicidal. But somehow, impossibly, it was working. Conqueror's hooves touched down on the ground and stayed there. His head, which had been tossing wildly just moments before, began to lower. His breathing, ragged and panicked, started to slow. "That is it," Sam murmured, close enough now to smell the sweat on the stallion's coat. "That is a good boy. Nothing to be afraid of. Just a lot of noise and people, that is all. Nothing that can hurt you." He extended his hand slowly, palm up, letting Conqueror catch his scent. The horse's nostrils flared as he processed this new information, this unfamiliar human who approached without fear or aggression. For a long moment, nothing happened. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a soft snort, Conqueror lowered his head and pressed his muzzle against Sam's outstretched palm. The crowd erupted in astonished murmurs. Sam barely noticed. He was too focused on the horse in front of him, on maintaining the connection that had somehow formed between them. With his free hand, he reached up and began to stroke Conqueror's neck, feeling the tension gradually drain from those powerful muscles. "Good boy," he repeated over and over. "Good boy. You are safe now. Everything is okay." One of the stable hands approached cautiously with a lead rope, and Sam took it without breaking his rhythm of gentle words and soothing touches. He clipped it to Conqueror's halter and led him slowly away from the crowd, toward a quieter area where the horse could finish calming down. Billy Thornton watched this entire scene with an expression that shifted from disbelief to confusion to something that might have been shame. His trophy, which he had been clutching so proudly just minutes before, now hung forgotten at his side. He had spent his entire life around horses, had been trained by the best riders and coaches money could buy, and yet he had been helpless when his own animal needed him most. Meanwhile, this poor boy from a rundown farm had walked into a dangerous situation and handled it with a calm competence that Billy could not even begin to understand. Sam stayed with Conqueror for nearly 20 minutes, talking to him and stroking his neck until the last traces of panic had faded from the stallion's eyes. By the time the stable hands were confident enough to take over, a small crowd had gathered to watch. Among them was Harold Bruckner, the auctioneer who had mocked Hope so cruelly at the auction all those months ago. He stood at the edge of the group, his expression thoughtful, his usual bluster notably absent. When Sam finally stepped away from Conqueror and began walking back toward his family, Harold intercepted him. The auctioneer seemed uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot like a schoolboy called to the principal's office. "What you did back there," he began, then stopped and cleared his throat. "What I mean to say is that was something special. I have been around horses my whole life, and I have never seen anyone handle a situation like that so well." Sam was not sure how to respond. He had never expected any acknowledgement from Harold Bruckner, let alone what sounded almost like an apology. "Thank you, sir," he managed. "I just did what needed to be done." Harold nodded, his jaw working as if chewing on words he was not used to saying. "Listen, son, about that horse of yours, the one you bought at my auction." Sam felt his shoulders tense, wondering if this was going to turn into another lecture about foolish decisions and worthless animals. But Harold surprised him. "I was wrong about her," the auctioneer continued, his voice gruff but sincere. "I called her worthless, said she was fit for nothing but the glue factory. But I watched you two in that competition today, saw her clear those jumps like she had something to prove. That horse has more heart than half the animals I sell for 10 times her price. I just wanted you to know that I see that now." Before Sam could respond, another voice cut through the crowd. "The boy deserves more than just words." It was Mr. Thornton, Billy's father, a tall man with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to being obeyed. He strode toward Sam with purpose in his step, his son trailing behind with a sullen expression. "You saved my horse today," Mr. Thornton continued, stopping directly in front of Sam. Conqueror is worth a small fortune, and more importantly, he has sentimental value to our family. If he had injured someone or himself, the consequences would have been severe. You prevented that, and I intend to show my gratitude properly." Sam shook his head, uncomfortable with the attention. "I did not do it for a reward, sir. I just could not stand by and watch a frightened animal hurt itself or someone else." Mr. Thornton smiled, a genuine expression that softened his stern features. "I know you did not," he said. That is precisely why you deserve one." He turned to address the crowd that had gathered around them. "This young man and his horse completed a course today that defeated riders with far more experience and far more expensive animals. He did it on a horse that everyone, myself included, dismissed as worthless. And then he stepped forward to help when trained professionals could not. If that is not the definition of a true horseman, I do not know what is." The crowd murmured in agreement, and Sam felt his cheeks flush with embarrassment. He was not used to being praised, especially not by wealthy, powerful men like Mr. Thornton. His eyes sought out his parents in the crowd, finding them standing together with identical expressions of tearful pride. Beside them stood Hope, her head raised alertly, as if she too was following the proceedings. "I would like to offer you a job," Mr. Thornton continued, drawing Sam's attention back. "At my stables. You would work with our horses, help train them, use that gift of yours to bring out the best in them. The pay is good, and you would have access to facilities and resources that could help your mare continue her recovery. What do you say?" Sam's mind reeled. A job at the Thornton stables was an opportunity that most aspiring horsemen would give anything for. The facilities there were legendary, the horses world-class, the training programs among the best in the country. But even as the logical part of his brain screamed at him to accept, another part hesitated. He looked at Hope, standing patiently beside his parents, and felt the familiar tug of their bond. Whatever he decided, it would have to be right for both of them. Sam took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The crowd waited in silence, every eye fixed on the poor boy who had somehow become the center of attention at a fair dominated by wealth and privilege. He thought about everything that had led to this moment, the auction where he had spent his life savings on a horse everyone called worthless, the months of struggle and sacrifice, the countless hours spent nursing Hope back to health when everyone said it was impossible. He thought about his parents who had supported him even when they could barely afford to feed themselves, and about Hope, who had trusted him completely even when she had every reason to give up. "Thank you, Mr. Thornton," Sam finally said, his voice steady despite the emotions churning inside him. "That is the most generous offer anyone has ever made me, and I am truly grateful. But I need to ask you something first. Can Hope come with me? Can she live at your stables and be cared for there too? Because wherever I go, she goes. We are a team, and I will not abandon her for any opportunity, no matter how good it seems." The crowd murmured at this, some people nodding in understanding while others shook their heads at what they perceived as foolish sentimentality. Mr. Thornton studied Sam for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. He reached out and placed a hand on Sam's shoulder, the gesture surprisingly warm for a man of his reputation. "Son," he said, "if you had answered any other way, I would have withdrawn the offer. A horseman who abandons his horse is not worth having, no matter how talented he might be. Of course, Hope can come with you. She will have her own stall, the best feed, and access to our veterinary staff. Consider it part of the package." Sam felt tears prickling at the corners of his eyes, but he blinked them back. "Thank you, sir," he managed to say. "Thank you so much. You will not regret this, I promise." Mr. Thornton nodded approvingly, then turned to address the crowd once more. "I think we have all learned something valuable today," he announced, We have learned that worth cannot be measured in dollars or pedigrees. We have learned that heart and determination can overcome any obstacle, and we have learned that sometimes the greatest champions come from the most unlikely places. He gestured toward Sam and Hope. Let us give these two the recognition they deserve. The applause that followed was thunderous, a wave of sound that washed over Sam and left him feeling simultaneously overwhelmed and vindicated. People who had ignored him earlier now pressed forward to shake his hand and congratulate him. Farmers who had laughed at him in the auction barn clapped him on the back and admitted they had been wrong. Even some of the wealthy riders who had looked down on him at the starting line offered grudging words of respect. Through it all, Sam kept one hand on Hope's neck, drawing strength from her steady presence beside him. Billy Thornton pushed through the crowd, his trophy still clutched in his hands, his expression a complicated mixture of emotions. For a moment, the two boys just looked at each other, years of antagonism hanging in the air between them. Then Billy did something completely unexpected. He extended the trophy toward Sam. "Here," he said, his voice barely above a mumble. "You should have this. You earned it more than I did." Sam stared at the trophy, then at Billy, too surprised to speak. "I mean it," Billy continued, looking uncomfortable but sincere. "What you did today, with your horse and then with mine, that was real. That was something I could never do with all my money and training. You deserve to be recognized for it." Sam reached out and gently pushed the trophy back toward Billy. "Keep it," he said quietly. "You won the race fair and square. Besides, I do not need a trophy to know what Hope and I accomplished today." Billy hesitated, then nodded slowly, something like respect flickering in his eyes. For the first time since they had known each other, an understanding passed between them, a recognition that perhaps they were not so different after all. Billy turned and walked away, his shoulders slightly less rigid than before, and Sam watched him go with a sense of closure that he had not expected to feel. The rest of that summer unfolded like a dream Sam had never dared to imagine. He began working at the Thornton stables, learning from the best trainers in the region, while sharing his own unique gifts with the horses in their care. Hope flourished in her new environment, her coat gleaming with health, her spirit brighter than ever before. The slight limp that had once marked her as worthless became a badge of honor, a reminder of everything she had overcome. Other horses at the stable seemed to gravitate toward her, as if recognizing in her a wisdom born of suffering and survival. Years passed, and Sam grew from a boy into a young man, but he never forgot the lessons that Hope had taught him. He never forgot that worth was not determined by price tags or appearances, that love and patience could heal even the deepest wounds, that every living creature deserved someone who believed in them. He became known throughout the region as a horse whisperer, someone who could reach animals that no one else could help, and he used his skills to rescue and rehabilitate countless horses that others had given up on. Each one reminded him of that moment in the auction barn when a scared 12-year-old boy had raised his hand and changed both their lives forever. Hope lived to a grand old age, her final years spent in comfort and peace at the farm that Sam eventually bought with his earnings. When she finally passed, surrounded by the family that loved her, Sam buried her beneath the old oak tree where they had spent so many quiet evenings together. On her grave marker, he inscribed a simple message that captured everything she had meant to him and to everyone whose life she had touched. "Here lies hope," it read. "She taught us that worthless things are often the most valuable of all." If this story touched your heart, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share a comment. Let me know where you are watching from and what this story meant to you. Stories like these remind us that compassion and perseverance can change the world one life at a time.